Hello, I've been running and the name Ruth Osman popped into my head. Who is Ruth Osman?
Hi, thanks for having me, Denise. Who am I? This is an interesting question, right? I'm Guyanese. I've been living in Trinidad for about just under 20 years. I'm a singer, songwriter, poet, and more recently, fiction. Yeah, many
Okay.
things.
So
Hopefully, some of them good.
you are a creative person. What have you done that you're very proud of?
My albums, my music. I have released two albums. The first one was called Letting Go, the second one was called Elemental. My debut poetry collection, All Made of Longing, won the Guyana Prize for Literature 2023 in the category of Best First Book of Poetry and placed second in the category of Best Book of Poetry overall. I have a daughter who is also a creative soul. We have a daughter, and nurturing her and her craft and her art and her spirit, right? Because spirit is very much a part of that whole process. We're hoping we get it right. But if we do, it would be one of the most beautiful things ever. She already is one of the most beautiful things ever.
Ruth, tell me about your records. You had two albums, you said?
Yes. So the first was produced by Jason Descent in 2013. It's called Letting Go. The second, called Elemental, was produced by Classic Music Entertainment in 2016. And the first one, as beautiful as it was when I did it, after a few years, and this is something that a lot of creators would talk about, after a few years, you look at the work that you did before and you're like, it was okay. But you yourself have evolved so much along a particular path that you look back at it and you're like, it was good for its time. Elemental, the second album, feels much closer to who I am today. And I could tell you that when I record again, hopefully soon, the feeling would be the same. There would be a similar feeling of having felt as if Elemental was also good for its time, but doesn't reflect my true voice because my true voice keeps evolving. And by voice, I don't just mean the physical voice, what I'm trying to say, the messages I'm trying to bring out in the music, the sorts of collaborations I'm trying to have. All of those things evolve over time. Yeah, I'm proud of them, but I'm also fully aware that you keep moving.
You talked about your true voice, and you talked about it both in terms of content and in terms of the physical voice. Tell me, how do you manage your physical voice?
Don't tell the people this, eh? Even though I know we're speaking in a video that you will be sharing publicly. I don't manage my physical voice as well as I should, not half as well. And that's something we can talk about later. I have spurts of doing the morning warm-ups, not drinking cold liquids, not drinking too much milk or cheese, using ginger tea when I have a performance, not speaking the day before into the day of a performance. I do those things in spurts. I tend to remember I'm supposed to be a singer at some point. I do that for about 3 weeks. And I also do it around performance time. If I know I have a series of shows coming up, or if a song is in my head, I'm writing something and it keeps playing in my head, then I tend to do the things that surround that art and the craft, like maintaining your voice. Don't take me as an example of how it's supposed to be done at all, because those are things that are supposed to be maintained over the long term.
So, your message to a young person looking at this video is don't do what you are doing.
I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about when we talk about talent. We don't talk about the fact that it takes endurance and perseverance to get to a particular point. Talent is one thing, and to sustain an artistic career, to sustain an art or a craft, you had to keep going at it systematically in a very sustainable manner. Seriously, if you're a singer, a musician, and we can talk about writing and all of that as well, because the principle applies across the board, right? In terms of the maintenance of your voice, no, don't do what I do. I'm lucky I could get away with it. I often do. But really, you should be much more conscientious about keeping your voice healthy.
You just said something that's interesting, that you're lucky. And I think that often talented people are seen as they are lucky. But I would
Mm.
love to see them put into a system, structure, and process that brings their talent out. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think luck can only carry you so far. Let's say a child has an inherent talent or capability, and they're lucky enough to have parents who notice that and put them into environments that nurture and enable them. We are talking schools and institutions that have to exist that nurture and feed that sort of talent. And we're not talking just university like UTT or UE. We're talking primary school, secondary school. We are talking about the child being placed in networks where they see and interact with artists, people who are doing the work, actively doing the work, and who are successful at doing the work. A lot of the older civilizations had really complex structures in place for the arts. India, Africa, Europe, Asia. When you read or hear about their poets and their musicians and their singers and dancers, we are talking mentorship. We are talking decades of training, of sitting at the feet of masters in the art form. And this is even before you start to practice the art form as an artist, right? Once you have mastered the art form, we are talking a society, a civilization, a culture in which your art form and your role is already embedded and seen as valuable. There's a place for you. So you're not just fighting in a marketplace, trying to figure out how do I get people to pay attention to my music or my poetry or my writing? Okay, how do I compete with this and this? Those societies had their temple singers, their temple dancers, their court jesters, their writers.
You've just talked about what has happened historically. It's the
Mhm.
Caribbean set up in such a way that we can find our talent and mentor our talent.
Thank you for bringing me back. And no, I don't think that it is. I have a dear historian friend who says that the Caribbean was never meant to be a place where beautiful things like that could emerge and thrive. The Caribbean was meant to be an outstation. You take it, you extract your resources, and you carry it somewhere else. The simple answer is no. And I'm not saying, though, that we haven't managed to do amazing things given our circumstances. But at the same time, no, the society was not built. It was not built to last in that way. It was not built for institutions to exist where people could thrive in a particular way that benefits them and the society to which they're born. No,
The
I don't think so.
modern day suggests that we are going to be here, we are permanent, to transform our system so that our creative people can thrive.
It takes vision on the part of leadership. Often our leaders are caught up, one, with, for want of a better word, mimicry, right? We're going to leave that right there, right? They don't quite seem to grasp the richness, talents of our people, of what comes up from the ground, from the people, the grassroots, the communities. And they seem to only be able to understand it when they need to monopolize on it or exploit it. But besides that, that setting of legislation, of policy, that building of institutions, and I'm not saying that those things don't happen, but they happen in this sort of haphazard, okay, you do one here and then you break down 10, that sort of way. And at the same time, even when I talk about our leaders, there's another part of me that fully believes that real change has to happen from the community level as well. There's a part of me that believes that you cannot wait on government, that they're not even making sense.
Yeah.
And that what you have to do is network and build.
Having
Yeah.
said that, what has popped into my mind is we hate Trinidad, but Trinidad to me is an example of what happens in the
Yes.
community.
Yes.
So to me,
Yes.
we need to put in some system structures and processes so that people like Trinidad can change what they're doing so that it
Mm-hmm.
gets greater global acceptance. If you had an opportunity to change things, what would you do?
If I had an opportunity to change things, I think I would try to build connections. And I would encourage people to build connections. I think connection is the most important thing. If people are able to connect, and I don't just mean touch, I mean feel, gain some understanding of, collaborate with, begin to trust, have other perspectives, connection in a very real, deep sense. If we were able to connect across so many of these boundaries that exist, across our prejudices, our biases, our fears and insecurities, I feel as if there is almost nothing that wouldn't be possible. So if I could change the world, I would try to help people connect. If we could all do that, I think almost all of our issues would be dealt with, or we would be able to deal with them.
So you're saying that connecting is more important. So tell
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
how did you discover that you were a singer and a writer?
I made both discoveries around the same time. I can't give you an exact age, but I was a child. My dad was editor-in-chief for the Chronicle. I grew up in church. Somewhere around 5, 6, 7, you joined the children's choir and you start to sing and somebody say, oh, you have a nice voice, right? And somewhere around that time as well, I think I was probably about 9 then. There was a competition for a Mother's Day poem or short story or something like that. And I sent my story in. So those things happened in early childhood. I started music lessons in Guyana. We migrated to Dominica when I was 12. In Dominica, there was a wonderful music school called the Carey School of Music that my parents enrolled me in. There I met Pearl Christian, who was at the time Chief Cultural Officer for Dominica, but also a wonderful flautist teacher. She used to have these annual musicals with all of the singers from the Carey School of Music. That was it. Flute lessons, vocal lessons at Carey School of Music, and this wonderful introduction to stage movement, singing, and theater, and all of that. And I think that Carey School of Music and Pearl Christian, I think they changed my life. Then I went back to Guyana to go to University of Guyana for my first degree. And when I went back, because of everything I had learned in Dominica, I quickly fell back into the stage aspect of religious life, of church. I was part of the church band, I was playing flutes, I was a creative arts director for the church. All of the major concerts that we had at the National Cultural Center or wherever, I was directing them for a number of years. And so I was embedded in that community in a particular way that also nurtured and honed my talents. So it's a number of things. It was, yes, formal training up to a certain level, but also just the opportunity to practice, the opportunity to put things on, to produce things, to spend time with other artists and musicians and come up with play ideas and write songs for a concert. All of those things melded.
What do you see as your future?
The future is unknown. What I see, I'll tell you what I see. And this is shifting. This is shifting. Recently, I've been writing more than anything else. And so I have decided I'm going to be a writer that's going to be remembered. We need our myths, we need our stories, we need our ways of looking at the world that are unique to us, while at the same time being rooted in the history of who we are as peoples, because we're more than one people here in this space. I've been feeling more and more as if the role of an artist is not just entertainment. It's also not just to make people feel good. That might happen. That's cool. I'm not going to complain if that happens. But the role of an artist is to be a pointer man or a pointer woman. And again, we're connecting, right? So connecting past and connecting present to future, pointing forward and saying, this is who we are and this is who we could be. This is the way we view the world. This is our worldview. This is the mythos, the narrative, These are the stories. These are the values. This is the ideology. I feel as if those things are not expressed, spoken about, discussed anymore. And we are poorer for it. We are poorer for it. And I don't think they just have to be discussed in this academic sense. And I'm not saying that's all. I'm saying that's what art does. Every piece of art has an underlying philosophy. You can look at a piece of art and realize what the author, the singer, the dancer, what their world view is, what they think about their role in the space. It's obvious when you look at art. I have decided that is what I want to do. I want my work to speak in that way. I'm working on a series of short stories. There might be a novel somewhere in between. I'm thinking that will most likely be my next publication, a collection of short stories.
Just as we wrap up, not many parents would see dancing as a future for their child. So tell me about it. Is that her future?
I'm trying so hard not to lock her in to my desire. I'm an artist, and it feels natural to say, you can dance, or you're going to be a dancer for the rest of your life. So I'm being very careful to encourage her, to nurture her talents, to help her and support her, to take it as far as it goes without saying, this is what you have to do. It's such an interesting balance, nurturing your children and the time they've been given, but not imposing your perspective. But we have been talking about dance school, we've been talking about university.
In terms of our future, how could we ensure that our talented dancers and singers remain here and still achieve the best they can?
That's such an interesting question. And I think it's a multifaceted issue. One of the things that I could point to, for example, let's say UT, right? So there's this wonderful institution that produces these amazingly talented and proficient musicians, dancers, singers, etc., artists. It feels almost as if the society itself cannot sustain them when they come out. So it's one thing to talk about training, right? Which is also a challenge. It's another thing to say, once they're trained, what does the society offer? Where can they work? Where can they earn a living from this? I think that's part of the challenge. The challenge is not just providing them with the opportunities to learn. And we don't do that too well. Trinidad and Tobago seem to put their artists in these little holes or boxes. You work during carnival, right? Your music is only valuable or valid if it is related to carnival. So I think that question about what do we do to keep our talents, it's not simple, and it's not one group of people that can do it. It's not the government, it's not the institutions, it's not the artists themselves, it's not the general marketplace, the audience. I think certain conditions and certain groups of people need to be working in sync for something to happen. I'm not quite sure how possible that is.
So, what would be your goodbye statement to us?
A goodbye statement to be rooted in the question you asked. How do we sustain and maintain our talent? Both as the artist, the creative person, and the community to which they belong. I want to say that both have to be in sync. I want to encourage community, audience, people to look at the artists around them and not just say, oh, I like that because it's making me feel good. Is the artist doing something? Are they reflecting a reality back to you that you think deserves to be pushed forward, to be spread? I want to ask community to dig a little deeper inside ourselves, right? And I want to encourage artists to do the work. And by do the work, I don't just mean the vocal warm-ups. By do the work, dig into history, dig into community, dig into yourself, the psychology of it, your dreams, write them down, journal. I'm talking about that deep relationship with life and living. I feel as if an artist like that met a community like that then all of these things, we could actually rolling. An artist who digs deep, asks the questions and embodies those questions, and a community that understands that role isn't looking just to be entertained, but supports that because they benefit from the vision. They say, oh, that's where we go. I feel as if those two things, when they interlock, that's an amazing thing that cannot be stopped. And so that's what I would say to all of us. Do the hard work, ask the hard questions, connect the dots. Yeah.
Do the hard work, ask the hard questions, connect the dots, and dig deep. Thank you ever so much, Ruth. All the best.
Thank you for having me.